This is not the full picture, but this is a simplified picture. You have the brands, distributors, and then you have the retailers. The retailers are number of categories, of types. So you have the franchisees, then you have the department stores. The department stores coverage here will be focused more on the concessions-based department stores. And then you have other formats, other types of bricks and mortar. So brands, of course, can have their own direct stores, and that's represented. So that's basically a picture in terms of the landscape. Let's now look at the relationship across those levels. So the first one is we have an interesting game being played here between brands and retailers. Brands are trying to reinvent themselves to be retailers for a number of reasons. They want to get closer to the customer, they want to cut out the middleman, they want to increase their revenue, they want to enhance the brand value. You know, many reasons why brands are trying to become retailers. And actually, the same thing is happening from a retail perspective. If you look at department stores right now have one big, massive challenge: how to achieve differentiation. For many of them, you know, they're going about differentiation using private label, and they're trying to reinvent themselves. So gradually, we started to see a shift away from pure concession or an asset-light model, as it was known a few years ago, to private labels. Why do they want to do private labels? Because of differentiation. So brands are becoming retailers, retailers are trying to become brands. You have an interesting relationship love-hate relationship between brands and franchisees. And this relationship is being tested these days, and I'll cover that. And retailers are coming under massive pressure from all sides. And then finally, the distributors are also trying to expand, increase their footprint. So let's go through this in a bit more detail. Due to rising costs, due to social advent and mobile and so on, brands are now recognizing they need to be closer to the customers. That's a challenge because there is a different mentality. Even things like customer insight, which would be taken for granted, is something that they might have a problem to basically adapt the business in order to achieve this. Because of the internationalization, they are now basically having to look at merchandising and sizing in all countries in all seasons at the same time. So you can't just basically have 2 seasons now because of internationalization. You need to be constantly aware of what's happening globally in terms of the supply and demand on the brand. From a retail perspective, again, they are obviously having a lot of challenges. Expensive rent, this is globally. Poor retention, these are real problems. Lack of skills, especially in this part of the world, in terms of that kind of merchandising and multi-channel skills, because they're not used to it. If you take a merchandiser from a department store, which is purely concession-based, this person is more of a relationship manager, not a merchandiser in the sense that we understand, i.e. someone who understands range mix and range balance and merchandise. You know, that's not the kind of skills that they are used to. Hence the need for education, hence the need for someone taking responsibility to basically ensure that there is more synergy between what's coming out in terms of the fashion, young designers and the retailers. But these guys are also finding it hard. Retail traditionally is very segmented, is very verticalized. Marketing, merchandise, supply chain, customer service, they all sit in silos. And this doesn't work anymore. In a multi-channel world, you need to be horizontal. So the merchandiser need to think about life from a marketer perspective, from a supply chain perspective. Absolutely, otherwise it won't work. What's the point of creating a promotion and giving this really interesting promotion if you don't check with your supply chain to make sure that you actually have enough stock? And you don't alert the customer service who might be bombarded by issues, by complaints. Customer service is an interesting one. This is especially true in China. Because of the systems in China, each entity, each store is a separate legal entity. So there is a very strong decentralized way of trading. So who's paying the price? Customers, because customer services is decentralized. So customer service is a function of the store. No one is actually looking at customer service centrally. across the store. And that is one of the things that needs to change. And because of the financial, intercompany transfer in China will attract tax. So it's complicated, from a Chinese perspective. But then again, everything in China is complicated. So that's not, there's no exception. But that's the challenge faced by retailers today. From a distributor's perspective, low volume margin, feeling the threat, feeling the pressure from the brands, they are trying to come up with other ways how to expand their footprint, how to increase their revenue stream. From a franchising perspective, these are the things that brands care about. Consistency in brand values, clarity in brand values to make sure that actually it's consistent across all franchisees. Trying to achieve excellence in customer service, encouraging the franchisees to have more interest in customer insight, a deeper understanding of customer insight. So even if a brand is 100% dependent on franchising, and hence they might think, well, we're just a B2B, that actually isn't true anymore. You need to be thinking also about B2C because you need to assist your B2B partners how to deal with B2C. It's a balance. At one end, you want to centralize and you want to productize and you want to have that kind of cookie cutter approach to make things easier for you, to win more franchise and to expand. On the other hand, you need to be thinking more about localization. And that's the kind of challenge. From distributors, as I said, they are trying now to also get closer to customers. But in many cases, they are being hampered, being prevented. They are trying to find ways to go into other channels, like online, and they are having problems either because the brands won't allow them because the brands have their own channels, or because they don't trust that they can basically communicate the same brand values if they do it on their own. So that's these are some of the challenges. So what's happening? What are people doing to combat these challenges? Well, the answer to all of them, across all levels, is to try to introduce e-commerce, to try to introduce online. So brands are going e-commerce, distributors are trying to go e-commerce, and the same goes from department stores, franchisees, and so on. Everyone is trying to go online and go to e-commerce, and that's how the problem is now happening. So let's look at some of the challenges emerging from this move. First, let's look at the brands, franchisees relationship. I met both camps. So I met brands who are interested to go online, but they are worried about upsetting their franchisees. So they're not quite sure how to do it without making the franchisees feeling threatened. And franchisees see online as one thing, and that is cannibalization. They immediately see the threat. And so you have the problem. And they're not quite sure how to do it. So for many brands, they're unsure, do you include them? Do you exclude them? If you bring them in, how much, how far? All of these questions are right now real issues. And commercial constraints, of course, in terms of territory and and the rules and so on. In terms of the franchisees and distributors, to a lot of them, they are having commercial constraints, i.e. they're not allowed to sell in other channels. Sometimes I've seen it other way around, by the way, i.e. a franchisee will sign a contract with a brand and the franchisee use a smart lawyer and draft the contract in such a way that they have exclusivity in that market, in that channel. If you're gonna do internationalization, please make sure, from a brand perspective, don't give anyone exclusivity, because otherwise you're just gonna lock yourself out in the market. Some of the other challenges is, how do you convince a brand that you understand their brand values and you're not gonna compromise it? And finally, this is another problem which is emerging. This is a very recent problem, which is the brands are happy for you to go online, as far as the distributor is concerned. But the problem is you're dealing with multiple brands and each one of them want to go to a different platform. That's a different problem. The first problem that a department store concession base has is how to convince the brand to accept to come online. Today, in a concession department store, as a brand, I can walk into that department store and I can pick the merchandise because it's mine. Doesn't belong to the department store. I own it, so I can take it and I can even cross the road and give it to a competitor. Fully able to do this. In an e-commerce world, brands can't do that anymore because retailers, understandably, need visibility on the stock. They need to have control, otherwise how can you sell? And typically you wouldn't pick from store unless you're talking about really high value items. You will pick from a warehouse. So now you need to convince the brand you're going to take the stock that they own and you're going to put it in a warehouse. And that is a challenge. You need to have visibility on an SKU level. Many department stores have visibility on a class level, some even on a brand level, but not on an SKU level. And it sounds so obvious, sounds so simple. So what's the big deal? What's the problem? Without variance, without the size and color, you can't trade. You don't know what you have. The processes is another challenge. How do you change your process to basically enable you to connect to these channels? And we talked about the trading skills and so on. This is not meant to scare you. This is just meant to basically, that's the demon, and you can now take it apart. If anyone thinks that multi-channel or e-commerce means a big bang, you just flick a switch and you're on, that's not how it works. It's just a business like any business. So we typically say to our customers, you need to have between 30 and 50,000 SKUs to go live. Not in day one. So day one you have only 10,000, that's fine. It's an iterative game. You keep on adding to it. The key thing is you start on solid foundation. You know what you're doing. So you can think big, but start small. But absolutely can be done, because we've been doing this for 20 years as a business. This is not, a journey into the unknown. This is, as long as you are aware of what's going on and you take steps to deal with it, you can deal with it.